The father of Adolf Hitler was Alois Hitler, and he was married 3 times. His first wife was Anna Glasl-Hörer, who was 14 years older than he was, being born on the 26th of March 1823. Whilst he was still married to her, he started to meet Franziska Matzelsberger, who was 24 years younger than he was. So one can imagine how Anna felt about being traded in for a girl 37 years younger than she was. Because of the relationship between Alois and Franziska, Anna and Alois were divorced in 1880. Alois Junior came about because of this relationship. He was born on the 13th of January 1882, and his parents got married the following year. Franziska and Alois got a home help called Klara Pölzl, and a pattern started developing when Alois got involved with her. She got pregnant around the time that Franziska died on the 10th of August 1884. 5 years later, she gave birth to Adolf Hitler. Alois Hitler Junior, the product of Hitler's father's relationship with Franziska Matzelsberger, went off to the UK aged 23 in 1905. I've done a more detailed video explaining a bit about his life, so you might want to see that. Whilst he was in the United Kingdom, he met and married Bridget Dowling, and in 1911 their son, William Patrick, was born. Alois returned to Austria in 1915 despite the ongoing war, and later he settled in Hamburg. Although not divorced, he got married to Hedwig Frieda Amalie Mickli, known as Hette, in 1919, and on the 14th of March 1920 their son was born and given the name Tesdorf Kellenthal Heinrich Hitler, or he was commonly called Heinz, which is the name I shall use from now. Heinz Hitler effectively grew up under the regime of his uncle Adolf. His half-brother, William Patrick Hitler, who came to Germany following the Nazi seizure of power, was nothing but a hanger-on seeking to profit from his relationship with the Nazi dictator. Heinz Hitler was different. He was a product of the Nazi regime and dedicated to it, although he did boast of who his uncle was and used it for his own purposes. The Nazi regime set up schools which were to train its establishment elite, and Heinz Hitler was sent to one of them. The schools were called the National Political Educational Institutes, and the first was set up in May 1933. And by the end of the war, there were 43 of them, with around 7,000 students. This was a stepping stone to university education and designed for the next generation of National Socialist leaders. There were boarding schools. Physical education played a strong role, and the tradition was of pre-military training. For example, a day would begin with reveille and then out for physical exercise before breakfast. Exchanges were made in the 1930s with British private schools such as Eton and Harrow, which continue to this day to provide the entitled establishment elite in the United Kingdom. Unlike the British establishment, however, the selection process for these schools was based on the child being of what the Nazis termed Aryan descent, coming from a politically suitable family, and being in excellent physical health. Intellectual ability was not considered as important as the other features. Heinz Hitler attended the school in Ballenstedt, which is located in the Harz Mountains. Whilst there, he would also have attended the Hitler Youth meetings and, during the school holidays, the Reich Labor Service. In an interview which was published in the documentary film Hitler's family, which was shown on the History Channel around 2005, former classmate Hans Wolf-Werner described how Heinz Hitler behaved towards others. One of the lads had a car. They tore through Magdeburg like crazy without a license. The police stopped them, and Heinz Hitler showed his identity documents. The police just saluted and let them drive on. I think you'd agree that that is how the entitled establishment elite thinks it can behave, and whereas I've no doubt that the entitled establishment elite in the UK today would also try to do something like this, although I think there's less chance of them getting away with it. You may have contrary opinions, and that's why the comments section is available. On completion of his school in 1939, Heinz Hitler joined the Wehrmacht as an officer cadet. In 1941, he was assigned as a radio operator, being an NCO with the 23rd Regiment of the Potsdam Artillery, which was part of the 23rd Infantry Division. It appears as though whereas he was keen to serve at the front, after all, he was a young man brought up in the Nazi ideology, his uncle Adolf was not at all keen on the idea. Hitler didn't mind condemning millions of people to fight for him, for his causes, but he did not expect his own family to take risks. Hitler, in my opinion, behaved rather cowardly throughout the war. The first sign of danger, he was out of there, but unlike Stalin, he did try to protect his own family. Stalin also, of course, behaved in a somewhat cowardly manner as well. The 23rd Infantry Division was commanded by Lieutenant General Heinz Helmich. At the beginning of the attack on the Soviet Union in June 1941, it was part of the 4th Army, which was in turn part of Army Group Center. It participated in the battles of Białystok, Minsk, Berezina, Vyazma, and Mozaisk. However, in freezing weather, in its advance on Moscow on the 1st December 1941, it was surrounded and had to fight its way out towards Klin, where it came under heavy Soviet attacks. Now here the story of Heinz Hitler becomes a bit vague. I'll tell you what the story is, which is normally given, and then I'll sort of give you a bit of my interpretation, because I don't accept the given story. On the evening of the 10th of January 1942, Heinz Hitler was ordered to salvage telecommunications equipment from an advanced position that had already been abandoned. Whilst attempting to recuperate this equipment, he was captured and taken to Butyrka prison in Moscow. Butyrka prison dates the 18th century when it was built as a fortress. As a prison, it held many political prisoners from the Tsarist regime and then from the communists. It was a political prison and became a transit point for many on their way to the Gulag. In 1937, it was said to have held up to 30,000 inmates, that's to say 275 people per 25-bed cell. During the war, around 1,000 Germans may have been killed or died there. One of those was Heinz Hitler, who is said to have been tortured to death on the 21st of February 1942. I appreciate that the equipment would have had to be rescued, but sending someone back to abandoned positions in the conditions that existed in the Klin sector in January 1942 was tantamount to a suicide mission. So either someone wanted to get rid of him or he wanted to do something to earn a bravery award. Why was the position abandoned in the first place? Why was the equipment not destroyed? Of course, there was probably a very good reason for both. But if something had to be abandoned in those conditions, would somebody later be sent back to collect it, particularly a high net worth individual, such as Heinz Hitler, high net worth because of his uncle? As Heinz Hitler had already shown his arrogance towards the authorities, I suspect that he had the type of character that whoever ordered him to do it wanted him gone. The next thing I find hard to believe is the manner of his death. I've been unable to find out an original reference to him being tortured to death, although it's often repeated. So I suspect that it may have come about as a piece of wartime propaganda. Heinz Hitler, because of his uncle, was, as I just mentioned, a high-value prisoner. After the war, Molotov said that an approach had been made by the High Command of the German Armed Forces through the Swedish Red Cross to swap him for Stalin's son, Yakov Dugashvili, who had been captured on the 16th of July 1941. Stalin treated his son with utter contempt and was not interested. It also needs to be remembered that the Nazi front in the Soviet Union was collapsing in January 1942, and flushed with victory, the Soviet dictator might have thought he was on the verge of winning the war, so therefore didn't have to do any deals with the Nazis. Adolf Hitler's other nephew, Leo Rudolf Rabaul, was also captured. He was captured on the 31st of January 1943 during the Battle of Stalingrad. Stalin also refused an exchange of him for his son Yakov Dugashvili. There's no confirmation of the date of his death either. 21st of February 1942 is the one which is usually given. Officially, Heinz Hitler is still missing in action, although his father Alois Hitler benefited from the Nazi regime having his own cafe, which was frequented by the Nazi top brass and made him quite wealthy. His family stated that he never got over the loss of his son. According to the foster daughter of Hedwig and Alois Hitler, what bothered them was not knowing what had happened. Alois Hitler said that he could accept knowing that his son had been killed, but not that he did not know what had happened to him. I suspect that what really happened was that Heinz Hitler was wounded whilst being captured, and as a high-value prisoner was taken to Butyrka rather than a POW camp, and he died there from his injuries. This, of course, is just conjecture on my part. There's no proof whatsoever, but I do think that the truth of what happened is in a Russian archive, and that it will come out one day. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that interesting, and I upload on Fridays at 2000 hours my time, Central European time, and if you are then available and you watch the premiere, you can interact with me and other viewers, and that will give you some contact with us, should you so desire. Thanks for being here, and all the best from me.